Occult Confessions is brought to you commercial-free through the generous support of our patrons. Visit occultconfessions.com and click on Donate to help keep the history of the occult on the digital airwaves. John Paul II took his name from his predecessor, who died after only 33 days in office. He was the second longest-serving pope, occupying the papacy from 1978 to 2005. The Polish pope lived through Nazi occupation as a child and was instrumental in the downfall of communism in his home country, the Eastern Bloc, and Russia. He's also credited with improving relationships with the Jews, being the first pope to make an official visit to a synagogue. His views on sex, articulated in his writing and speech and collected together as his Theology of the Body, were fairly traditional, if more voluminous than his predecessors, and are widely cited in both Catholic and Protestant literature on the subject. For a man who had never married and was ordained at the age of 26, this was an ambitious project to define God's intention for romantic love, sex, and marriage. While he did not adopt the Manichaean view that the body was evil, and in fact directly criticized it, he charted a fairly narrow path for good Catholic sexual morality. On gay rights, he affirmed the basic human dignity of homosexual people, but he worried whether attempts to legalize gay marriage were part of a new ideology of evil overtaking the Western world. John Paul II was also the reigning pope for many of the Church's most egregious scandals and cover-ups surrounding sex crimes perpetrated by the Catholic clergy, members of the Catholic. While he had no direct personal responsibility for these crimes, they cast a shadow on his calls for sexual innocence and bodily purity. The Pope of the 80s and 90s, and even some of the 2000s, frames today's second part of our exploration of Christian sex education. You will be not surprised at all, I'm sure, dear confessors, that the person I have asked to be with me here today to talk about the Pope is none other than our Catholic in residence. Please welcome back Riley Claxton Hernandez. Riley?
Hi. I'm so happy to be here.
To remind everyone, your first child's named after John Paul II.
He is. His name is John Paul.
So you did a good job.
I feel like I'm the person here, right?
That's who else should be here talking about John Paul II's view on the theology of the body. You got some familiarity with this, yes?
I do. I love the theology of the body. I read the theology of the body for the first time at 16 years old, all the way through.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you mean all the way through?
I read Love and Responsibility. I read his...
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I read like a collection of his thoughts on theology of the body, like all the themes, you know what I mean? I don't have time for...
It's thick.
800 pages or whatever, yeah. It's a big old thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Let's pledge it out. We, the members of the Secret Order of Alchemical Actors, do solemnly commit ourselves to a full and honest telling of the history of the occult as far as we know it. All right, so now I warned Riley that her job may be to yell at me today. We'll see what happens. Riley's here as a counterpoint to my madness, because I got to be honest, Riley, there's a couple times I was working on Christian sex ed. I hadn't read Theology of the Body yet, but it kept coming up, and I started thinking of you because I know you really love this. And I said, okay, fine, I'm just finally going to read it. So it's not like a book you can read. There are different, versions of it. So I got this, sort of like collection of John Paul's ideas on Theology of the Body. And that is finally what pushed me to publish, to decide that I'm going to do this episode, because I had these thoughts that I'm going to share today before, and I pulled them back. I said, I'm not going to put these on the air because theologically I wasn't comfortable with them until I read John Paul II. And then I was all right with them, but you may not be as okay with them, because I know the Catholic Church has strong feelings about some of the things I'm going to advocate for. Anyhow, let's stop being so vague and get into the details. John Paul II began his argument about the meaning of Christian marriage with Adam and Eve, a fairly common approach going all the way back to Augustine. Unlike St. Augustine of Hippo, John Paul treated the Genesis story as an allegory. And I want to be fair here and thorough. Augustine was comfortable with people talking about Genesis as an allegory, but preferred to literalize it as much as possible, which was its own intellectual challenge. Anyhow, John Paul was good with it being an allegory that contained, however, the literal word of God. John Paul said that the language of Genesis is mythical, reflecting a deeper way of knowing, and also that the vision of man found in Genesis doesn't require us to renounce science or to ignore its findings. All right, we see what he's up to here. We got to deal with Darwin when we're reading Adam and Eve. As Pope, he had accepted evolution as in no way contradicting church teaching, but science contradicts the literal words of Genesis, and so for Genesis to make sense as a source for understanding ourselves and our sexuality, we have to read it figuratively. God placed humans on earth and set humans apart from the animals because humans alone were made in God's image. Humans are placed in the natural world and are part of it, but we are also separate from or above it. For this reason, Adam felt alone among the animals and asked God for a partner, namely Eve. Thus was the beginning of human intimacy and love and everything else interhuman. Adam and Eve were originally unashamed of their nakedness because they were fully open and honest with each other and with God. Again, this is a John Paul reading. They literally and figuratively had nothing to hide. There was no opposition between the physical and the spiritual. The body expressed the desires and inclinations of the spirit. Sex in this state was an opportunity to rediscover the mystery of creation. It was a selfless act of self-giving that mirrored the Creator's love for his creation. This is the proper way for contemporary humans to approach sex, says the Pope. Now, the mere suggestion that Adam and Eve had sex in the garden would be anathema to our year 400 Catholic. Yeah, crazy idea. Augustine's suggestion that they ever had sex. What am I saying here? That they could have had sex. Augustine said they didn't have sex in the garden, but that they could have, and he was pushing the boundaries there. John Chrysostom, anyhow, getting too nerdy. So, what are we talking about? Sex. So, contra Augustine, John Paul suggested it's possible for contemporary humans to achieve Adam and Eve-like innocence through their church-sanctioned marital sexual unions. I'll also say Augustine did not feel this way, that sex was something that we really needed to reserve for procreation and try not to enjoy it too much. Nakedness only became shameful when Adam and Eve no longer approached each other as gifts, but rather viewed each other as objects, when their perspective shifted from giving to taking. Their choice to put on clothing was a sign that they had lost their understanding of the true spiritual value of their bodies. Such was the knowledge of good and evil. So far, so good, Riley?
Yeah.
All right. Following the fall, we become subject to lust. I should try to make that sound worse than I did.
Done.
Oh, there you go. That helps. Yeah. I made it sound kind of sexy, which it literally is. John Paul, lust. John Paul defined lust in interesting terms. First, he called it an insatiable desire. While this may be partially true for a 14-year-old, even the 14-year-old manages to hang out with his friends, ride or skateboard, play video games, and pass algebra class. Insatiable. John Paul's point is well taken that for that teenager, the sexual urge persists and returns on a regular basis, but it's difficult to fathom a situation in which that teenager would be able to actually satisfy those desires in a way John Paul approves of. Because we're really talking about marriage, right?
Yeah.
That's the appropriate outlet for sex, despite the fact that, those feelings go back way before you can get married. It's equally difficult to imagine that we would want that teenager to feel badly about those feelings just because they weren't expressed in a perfectly innocent and selfless partnership. The word insatiable, in my opinion, becomes less applicable as we age. As adults, our sexual feelings may be strong at some times and less strong at others, and are by no means constant and nagging, whether we are married or unmarried. Is that fair, Riley?
Yeah.
We get other stuff done. We think about other things. We podcast. He goes on to say that the lust of the flesh desires to satisfy the body in ways that limit or harm the communion of persons. For the man, lust stirs up an impulse to dominate and use the woman. I'm still going to pick on John Paul here, just so you know. Obviously, I'm going to pick on John Paul here. Naturally, Christian sexual ethics assume a heteronormative world with fixed gender roles. But this, in my opinion, is kind of an extreme way to talk about those gender roles. The notion that all heterosexual men's sexual feelings surface in a desire to dominate women reduces the vast complexity of male sexuality in a way that's hardly coherent. Some men desire to be dominated by women. Many men are sexually gratified by pleasing their female partners regardless of the depth of their commitment to their partner, and even put their female partner's pleasure first. Here I'm speaking about men who, I don't know, just like to go down on women. Like, they don't need to be married to them, but maybe their kink is that that's what they want to do. Many couples outside of marriage are strongly motivated to please each other in their first, second, and third sexual encounters. This doesn't fit neatly into a drive to dominate.
I mean, I definitely think, though, when I hear this, I think of younger people. I don't think of the 50-year-old man. I don't think of, which I do think is a sign of his celibacy. And I don't know, and that may be also his only experience ever in the sexual or dating world would have been as a teenager. It would have been a young person. And I do think that is where he's drawing some experience, his only experience. You know, where teenagers are obsessed with that, you know, they are. I think that's, if you would use the term insatiable, I think that would define a younger person.
You sort of cut off at that point.
Yes. Yeah.
He goes back to that.
Yes. And even though many people who work for the church, who dictate the teachings of the church, the main thing that they are missing, a lot of them, is that lived experience that is so crucial to understanding humanity as a whole. Mm-hmm. And if you're and we pull from lived experience. It's that what we do as humans. So, yeah.
I agree. John Paul said that the original commandments of the Old Testament aren't sufficient for Christian sexual ethics because God originally allowed even the patriarchs to take multiple wives, or for wives to allow their husbands to have sex with servants to produce children. This is smart. The Old Testament's messy. The New Testament, theoretically less messy. Marriage in the Old Testament, he said, was about ownership and procreation. Taking another man's wife, as in the commandment against adultery, was more of a violation of property rights. In this world where marriage and love had a more tenuous relationship, Jesus stepped in to clarify what marriage should mean in terms of the relationship between the partners. John Paul quoted the Sermon on the Mount, in which Jesus commands that we do not look lustfully at one another. It is not enough to keep our bodies from sin, says John Paul. Our hearts must also be transformed. He goes on. We are moral beings, capable of choosing between right and wrong and responsible for our decisions. I personally don't disagree, but when we're talking about regulating our sexual feeling in our hearts and minds, we've entered a level of moral self-policing that honestly is difficult to fathom. I am responsible for how I choose to act on my feelings, but can I prevent myself from being attracted to someone I meet or see? My reaction is automatic, arguably instinctual, much like my reaction to a glass of water on a hot day, or a loaf of bread when I'm hungry. Thoughts on this before I get into the Sermon on the Mount?
Yeah, so the Catholic teaching that I could also say has been hammered into me since then every talk I've ever heard and every
the Sermon on the Mount's very popular.
Well, the Catholic teaching specifically on looking with lust upon other people and policing our own thoughts is that finding someone attractive, finding someone sexually attractive, having sexual thoughts, none of those are in any way a sin. Mm-hmm. Having sexual thoughts about a person, all of these things, they're natural, and in the Catechism, it says they are good and beautiful. Like, they're beautiful. They are in no way a sin. It's where, what do we do with those thoughts? And if those thoughts then cause you to look at another person as a person to be used, to objectify another person, to ignore their dignity, their personhood, that is when they turn into sin. That's the emphasis of it. And so there is no, these thoughts are okay and these thoughts aren't, because for every person that's going to be different. It's upon us to discern that within ourselves. You know, is this person, am I looking at this person as a person? Am I upholding their dignity? Am I valuing them as more than their body, as more than their sexuality, as more than what they could do for me?
Even if you might have sexual feelings.
Yeah.
Because we have a sexual bearing.
Yes.
Toward all people.
And that's natural. That is given by God.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful. It's good. It's just, the church will say it's meant to be channeled in a virtuous manner. And now whether or not you agree with what a virtuous manner is. So that's the that's again what I've been taught since a kid, but it's within you to decide, because for every person it's going to be different. Every person has different thresholds. Every person has different, issues. It's when that turns to use. It's when it turns to not valuing a human person.
I feel like biblically, gospel-wise, you guys are amalgamating Luke and Matthew here. Honestly.
Okay.
Let me read you Matthew,
Okay.
which will not be a surprise to you.
Okay.
But just think about the words in light of what you just told me.
You have heard it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better that you lose one of your members than that your whole body go into hell.
So, what does the term lust mean?
Okay.
I think that's the question here, and that's what a
You
lot
see
of
what
John
I'm
Paul
saying,
talks
though.
about. But what is lust? Is lust a sexual feeling? Sexual desire? Is that lust? In the Catholic term, no, it's not. Lust in the Catholic term is, again, about the use. It's about how we treat and view another human person and erasing them of their kind of personhood, reducing them to their sex.
Does that happen in our eye?
I mean, okay, he's not talking about ripping out your eye. So yeah. Yes. So yes, that does. I mean,
It starts in your eye, but
yes,
what you're
it starts
talking
in your
about
eye.
is...
And if viewing another person in that way causes you to lust. But I think that's what it comes down to, is what do you think lust means? And in the Catholic term, it doesn't just mean sexual desire. When we talk about lust, it's not just simply sexual attraction.
What else is it?
It's when it turns into that
Objectifying in any way.
Objectification.
How else do we objectify?
And
What do you mean? Like if I use you for a promotion or something? I'm trying to think, like, outside of sex.
If it truly degrades my personhood and reduces me to...
If you're like a maid, then we go the other way. If you're like my maid and I treat you as just like not a person, but a person who...
A slave?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're my maid. I mean, I'm paying you, but I'm trying to like fathom the difference, because slaves are cool in most of the Bible. But in modern Catholicism, we would equate, if treating someone like they're merely a factotum or somebody who is meant to just like do a job for me.
Yes.
That would be similar
Serve
to
a sexual
sexualizing
sense.
them.
Yes.
A contractor who comes to my house.
But,
Guy who's there to fix my dishwasher.
But a contractor coming to your house to fix your dishwasher, I mean, that is not degrading their humanity. That's
I hope not. I mean, I guess that's up to him.
It's not going against, natural law. Yeah, I mean, it is.
If you
found a dude on the street and who
You're like, come
was
in and
like,
fix
I don't
my
want to
dishwasher.
I don't want to fix your dishwasher.
All right.
I'm not here to fix your dishwasher, and you said yes you are, and you shackled him into your house and you made him fix your dishwasher. I mean,
it's an odd situation. So we're mostly talking about sex then.
Yes, we are. Yes. I mean, but in general, it's still objectification in different
It's conceivable
manners.
to economically objectify someone.
Yeah, of course.
All right, okay.
I mean, that's a whole different conversation, though.
So, I guess to drive Riley's point home then, let's listen to the tone in Luke, the Sermon on the Plain. We talked about previous episodes how there's some argument about whether the Sermon on the Plain and the Sermon on the Mount were adapted from the same exact source.
Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, Brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when you yourself fail to see the plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye.
Very similar. We talk about eyes in Luke. Plank in the eye.
Mm-hmm.
Pluck out the eye.
Yeah.
But plucking out the eye in Matthew and removing the plank from your own eye in Luke, it's like two different Jesuses. We have angry Jesus and we have chill Jesus. Like, Jesus got real high before he did the Sermon on the Plain, and he got real mad before he did the Sermon on the Mount.
I'd also argue that the main point, though, of Jesus saying, pluck out your eye if it causes you to lust, is that I think one of the main points is that your lust and your issues are you.
Okay.
Your sin is your issue. It's not anybody else's. You lusting after a woman is not the woman's issue, right? It is not the woman's problem that you are lusting after her. It's your issue. And so it's not the woman's job to, I don't know, figure it out. It's not the woman's job to disappear or cover up or any of those ways. It's all right. If your eye's causing you to lust, pluck it out. It's your issue. I do think that's one of the.
So you're reconciling Luke and Matthew here.
I think that's because I think that's the general theme. It's the same thing in the Sermon on the Mount, is him saying, stop worrying about what other people are doing. Stop worrying about the wood chip in, your friend's eye when you've got a plank in your own.
I like that.
That these are your issues to deal with it, and your sin is your issue. It's yours to take control of and not to blame on another person. It's not anyone else's problem.
Slut shaming through the eyes of Jesus.
Yeah.
All right.
Literally his response to, it's saying that if you are lusting after a woman, pluck out your eye. Then it's not her issue. We don't tell her to put on more clothes.
She can wear her bikini if she wants.
It's your issue. Yeah, like your sexual desire turning to lust and your issue. That's your own issue.
Your problem.
Yes.
In Matthew, Jesus asks us to strive for a kind of absolute sexual purity, although Riley disagrees. In Luke, Jesus acknowledges that nobody's perfect. We should be cool to each other and recognize our own moral frailty rather than finding fault in each other. There is, as Riley says, theoretically consistency in these viewpoints. We should strive for perfection in ourselves, but tolerate imperfection in others. I do think that the plucking out the eye is really harsh, like on yourself. This is a stringent, difficult attitude, I think, to take toward ourselves, and threatens the notion that we should treat each other as we would like to be treated. We'd like to be held to an unforgiving moral standard related to our sexual feelings, lest we get cast into hell. The man mentions hell.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we need to be hard on ourselves, pluck out that eye. But we should forgive others their sins, which may, by the way, get them cast into hell.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. But treat others like you want to be treated.
Yeah.
If you're treating yourself like hell is
absolutely. And that leads to
judgment. You should be judging people harsher.
Scrupulosity and all of those things.
So we just leave that. We're going to be like, it's a tough one.
Okay, but you're talking about treating other people. I still think,
like it's
a general theme throughout the gospel, and not in these verses, that, again, other people aren't your problem. We love other people. We show other people the love of Christ. We share the message. But ultimately, we worry for ourselves. He says it,
Cain did say, I'm not my brother's keeper.
I'm also talking about the gospel here specifically.
Okay. All right.
But if Jesus' message in
Cain generally not regarded as a hero, though, of the Catholic Church.
I'm talking about Cain. Talking about Jesus.
Okay.
And it's throughout, most of it, again, that we don't judge. It's another person's job.
To love and not judge. We should judge ourselves.
Not even that, though, I think. Ultimately,
we don't want to go to hell.
You could take it that way. I'm not saying you can. I definitely would say discernment.
Okay.
Is, we're in charge of our own discernment, our own conscience, forming our conscience, listening to that, following that, all of that. But that other people, I think that's the general theme, is that it is not our job to judge other people, and that God is the ultimate judge and the wise judge. He knows all things. He loves all of his creatures and
all of us down here.
Yeah.
Even if our eyes are casting us into hell.
He does. Yeah. That's still the message. And that he knows us better than he knows ourselves. All of those things. But I still think that's the main point of this message here is again that we are responsible for ourselves and not for anybody else. And so definitely shouldn't be judging anybody else when you yourself have your issues too. I think that's still the main part of the issues. Yes. And
even
especially
Cain.
when you look at the context of the day, the people who Jesus was dealing with, it was a lot of judging. I mean,
Yes.
still today. And so that when you also look at in the context of a lot of these discussions he was having with people, these are a lot of the questions he was being asked. Well, how do you deal with a person who did this? And how do you judge a person who's been involved in this and this kind of person? And what do you do in this situation? That's a lot of
He's like,
of the
"Don't worry about
gospel.
it."
It's a lot of people it's a lot of what he's asked it over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of what he's talking about.
Just don't do it. Don't judge. Let him be. God will sort it out. So I'm going to dwell on this eye a little bit more. What
Okay.
Jesus has to say in Matthew about cutting out your eye can be read as a message about rooting out the internal inclination to sin in your soul. That's fair, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Changing the way you are in the world. When my daughter was born, for example, I gave up eating meat. This was a moral choice mostly centered on my environmentalism and my health. This is going to be an important metaphor, so hang with me. I wanted to do my part to make the world cleaner for my children, to be as healthy as possible to raise them, and over time my choice got easier because I had less interest in eating meat and eventually found a lot of it unappealing. But there are still moments in my life when I look lustfully on a bacon cheeseburger. The harm here, from Jesus' standpoint, correct me if I'm wrong, is that if I sit there and dwell on this temptation, I could eventually decide to give up and just eat meat again, which would betray my own moral principle.
Yes.
Yeah? So we don't want to just stare there lustfully at meat or human meat. Matthew's Jesus applies this to sex. When I got married, I gave up sex with women who weren't my wife. This was a moral choice that I believe in, centered on my belief that a monogamous pair is ideal for fostering intimacy, providing emotional support through life's ups and downs, and raising children. I cannot say that my choice has gotten easier because I've had less interest in other women over time, truthfully. While I often find other women attractive, I honestly never seriously entertain the idea of having sexual relationships with them. So it's really not a problem for me. I'm not walking around like, oh boy, I would really love to have this affair because I got other things going on. What challenges my feelings of commitment to my wife, honestly, are conflicts in our home, which all couples have for their own reasons. And it's conceivable that my conflicts or someone else's may then lead to an affair, but the root cause is not the lust.
Yeah.
It's the conflict. Most people think, I think even therapists often talk about an affair as a product of some other issues in the home.
Yes.
It's not lust in and of itself.
Most of the time, yes.
Yeah. So the moral standard here goes deeper than preventing the act. And this is, every bloody sermon that's ever been given references the Sermon on the Mount, makes this point. Matthew's Jesus wants us to look inward and cut off the impulse to lust for its own sake, not merely to prevent committing adultery. So let's do some mental experiments here. Let's suppose I have a crush on a friend, and this friend is similarly attracted to me. This could lead me to entertain fantasies that pull me away from my wife and my heart. Even if I never act on these fantasies, I am less present for my wife and my family while my mind is on my fantasy mistress. Right? Basic idea. You're basically saying this.
Yep.
Going another way into this, let's suppose I develop a habit of visiting certain pornographic websites. Catholics hate those pornographic websites, Riley. I visit this website so much that I come to prefer self-pleasure with the website to sex with my wife. Matthew's or Jesus' point is very well taken, and I am okay with it in these instances. This makes good sense to me. However, you knew this was coming. The Bible imagines us having a fair amount of sex. My good Catholic.
Yeah.
Right? You're one of how many children again?
I'm the oldest of 7.
Right. So it's cool, right? Catholics, it's all good. Have a good time. It acknowledges, the Bible that is, that we have natural sexual drives. Genesis asks us to be fruitful and multiply. Y'all take that seriously, right?
Yeah.
It's an important line from that first book. But sex isn't always easy to come by in a world where we are limited to our marital partner for all sexual expression. Pregnancy is both the biological conclusion of sex and sometimes the greatest challenge to maintaining a sexual relationship. Yeah. A man's inclination to sex persists with modest modification, while his wife may find sex uncomfortable or painful. This could last for all or part of a pregnancy and for months or years after giving birth. And we should be sensitive to our partner, right? If we imagine the standard old school family of 5, which may sound huge today except to Riley, but was fairly normal for a lot of human history, those periods of time where the woman is not available take up a pretty significant portion of a marriage. 5 kids, right? 7 kids.
Yeah.
It could stretch on, especially if you have a birth injury. Biblical men, by the way, are also often leaving to go to war. I mean, not in the Gospels, right? But Jesus was like, pack your shit and go too. They followed Christ. So I can easily make the same argument with the genders flipped. There are long stretches of time when monogamous sex isn't easy to come by biblically, even though God has said we are made to become one flesh, presumably as a regular condition of our being, as in the Garden of Eden. All right, so we see things are getting complicated. Yeah.
So, are you going to bring is contraception coming up in this?
I am not opposed to discussing contraception.
Okay, I didn't know if that is coming up already. I'm deciding when I'm.
Hold that
bring
thought.
up what? Okay.
I'll bring this particular point on home. You see where you want to go with this. I agree with Matthew and/or Jesus that it would be wrong for, and by the way, Riley, I do have questions about the degree to which gospel writers have inserted themselves into these narratives.
Yeah.
I do tend to buy the argument that Matthew was arguing with Paul and didn't agree with him on a variety of things, particularly when it comes to the law of Moses. Anyhow, I agree with Matthew and/or Jesus that it would be wrong for a young father or soon-to-be father to seek affection from other women rather than provide aid and comfort to his wife. Just as it would be wrong for a young wife to seek affection from other men rather than remain faithful to her husband who's away fighting a war. Not a big fan of wars, but I get the moral principle there. But what happens to all those unsatiated sexual feelings? If I ignore my instinctual desires, this could also breed alienation between myself and my partner. I could become bitter or resentful that my wife or husband won't satisfy my needs. Sex, after all, is an important part of life, says the Bible. Aside from Augustine, many Christians came to think of Adam and Eve as living in sexual paradise. Sex was part of what made their pre-fall relationship wonderful. Just ask John Milton or John Paul II. Sex is good, and sexual desire is good and necessary for a good relationship. I'm not really getting to contraception here. I'm sort of talking around it.
Another point I was going to insert there is you're talking about pregnancy and all these things and long periods of time of not having sex and what that can do to a marriage, especially in Catholic teaching, and it's everywhere, is have all the sex. Sex is great. Sex is crucial to a marriage. We talk all about, how spiritual sex is and the unity of body and soul, and that coming together in sex in a marriage is needed for intimacy, in general.
Period.
So an issue I have with that is obviously contraception is sinful in Catholicism.
Obviously.
Yes. And maybe I'll make a little explanation as to kind of why that might be. But again, we're talking a lot about physical unity and physical intimacy. And I'll just, this is very short, but, and that the Catholic teaching is that contraception cuts off the fruitfulness nature of sex, and that we're supposed to have sex in the way that God designed. All of the things, it's life-giving, it's fruitful. Contraception cuts that off. There's a lot of writing about it.
And vaginal intercourse. I mean, there's an opposition to, right?
So
non-procreative sex.
Do you want a little Catholic sex ed really quick?
That's what we're here for,
Here we
man.
go. Okay, so buckle your seatbelts, because I think a lot of people will be very surprised.
It is time to learn about non-vaginal intercourse.
So not only is contraception not allowed, but in every sexual act in a Catholic marriage, the man must ejaculate into the woman. The man cannot ejaculate outside of the woman intentionally. If it happens on accident,
some Old Testament stuff.
It is what it is.
But yeah.
The man must ejaculate into the woman. Now, everything else that protects the dignity of that person. So that's the line here, is that we're still upholding the dignity of the other person. But everything else is a go, as long as it is within the marital act. So you can, all of the things are a go. Before,
put on the masks, put on the furry suit.
As long as it's,
swing from the chandeliers.
But the man must ejaculate into the woman.
When all is said and done.
That has to happen.
Okay.
The man cannot intentionally ejaculate outside of the woman.
Okay.
It has to happen,
Okay.
in the woman.
Without contraception.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people don't know that. A lot of Catholics actually don't even really know that. A lot of non-catechized Catholics don't know that. I don't think I knew that for a while.
When did they drop that on
High
you?
High school?
What was that day like?
I mean, there's definitely, so you get a lot of these chastity talks growing up, and it sometimes, this isn't talked about. I mean, I get we're not talking about nitty gritty, like marital sexual ethics with 12-year-olds. Like, that's not the focus of their lives. But they don't need to really know that. But there is kind of this idea of like, and once you get married, everything goes. You know what I mean? Like, you just have fun, and you can have sex morning and night and all the time.
It's not a uniquely Catholic thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Protestants feel the similar way.
But in Protestants, everything does. They're in most Protestantism, there's
Well,
definitely obviously waves.
Yes.
Yes, there's none of that. There's no ejaculation rules. There's none of that. There's
and honestly, you can't invite the prostitute from around the corner into your bed. There are some rules.
within
yes,
your couple, you can
a great time.
Yeah, you can give your husband a hand job and not worry about going to purgatory. You can, and you can't. It can awesome. But here's the other thing with that. So yes, Catholics can't contracept, and I will say people that are far outside of Catholic and or crunchy circles might be like, well, then how the heck do you not have 25 kids? Mm-hmm. Some people do, and I would say most people that have, when you hear of Catholic families, I mean, one of a good friend of mine, you know how many? She's the oldest of.
How many?
17.
I can't fathom that.
She's the oldest of 17, and guess how old she is? 24.
What is the youngest is?
1 or 2.
Well, yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah.
To actually fit all those children into.
Anyway.
Wow.
So I went to a really small Catholic high school where in my grade and my friend group, I was the smallest family with 7 kids. However, a lot of these families, they chose that. A lot of these families, they want lots of kids. They like having lots of babies.
17.
But
is that a choice or a habit? Is that an addiction? What's going on? I'm sorry.
So I don't think she uses natural family planning.
Right. Okay.
So,
yes. So we're getting to natural family planning.
So that's what Catholics use as, some people call it Catholic birth control.
Mm-hmm. You test yourself if you're feeling very advanced
there's
about
lots
it.
of different ways, but basically,
we used it to make children.
Yes, you can use it to make children. Yeah. You can use it to not. And it's not just the rhythm method. A lot of people think that, but there's lots of different methods to be able to track a woman's fertility and know when she can and can't get pregnant.
Not foolproof.
It's not foolproof due to human error. I mean, obviously you can't, once you know when you can and can't get pregnant, it doesn't, an actual method failure is super rare, but it's hard to figure that out. It's hard to get to a place where human error isn't difficult
for even the best experts. My wife, the midwives that we went to, I think she still goes, the woman who was in charge of teaching this method had an accidental baby.
Yeah,
and she said to Katie, if you're going to do this, you need to be open to life. Katie and I do not have Catholic commitments. However, we are concerned about birth control in her bloodstream, that kind of stuff. So we have different concerns about it.
That's why I said Catholic and or crunchy.
Yeah, crunchy people like us.
Do you use Marquette? Is that what she does? The hormone testing? I
mean, not anymore, but yes.
That's what they did.
Yeah.
So there's also basal body temperature. You test your ovulation hormones, all of those things. Mm-hmm. However, when we're talking about not having sex, this is tedious. And also it requires abstinence for sometimes a large part of your month.
Right.
And the time that it requires abstinence, that period of time, happens to be the period of time that a woman most wants to have sex, that a woman is most,
irony of ironies.
is most easily orgasms, all of these things. And the time that is all green and you can go at it is when a woman naturally, hormonally
less interested,
does not want sex.
Yeah.
It has all of the drab hormones going on, and it's inherently misogynistic. It is. And so that's when if the goal of this, the goal of the not contracepting, the goal of having a totally fruitful, open, unifying marriage is unity, is intimacy, is all of these things, is at it, is full intimacy and unity.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to have that, you're doing this thing where maybe you're really not having sex at all. And especially people that are hyperfertile, maybe are so scared of getting pregnant. All of these things that can lead to married couples to have a lot of stress in their sexual relationships. How is that leading to unity and intimacy? I don't know. And that
you're not going to give us an answer here, are you?
You're listening to my own struggles.
This is
my internal, monologue. And this is when, a lot of Catholics might get mad at me, and I'm sure they would. And maybe
they're not listening to this
maybe
show.
call me, no, they're not. I know. Maybe call me not well catechized, which it's not true. I can tell you that. I am very well catechized.
What does that mean? Like you're not well read enough in the...
Yeah, yes. You're not,
yes,
you've not been taught, you haven't learned enough, you don't really know, which
you lack
I can
knowledge.
promise you it's not the case.
So it's not like a Protestant notion of you lacking the feeling.
No. Being not well catechized is that, yeah. And there are plenty of Catholics that aren't well catechized, that went through, Catholic school, anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. Regardless, but...
Didn't pay attention in religion class.
But a lot of people would argue that religion class doesn't really catechize. Anyway.
Okay.
So, anyway, but, so that's when I think the lived experience, again, the people that their job was to come up with these nitty-gritty details, and these are very new. I want everyone to know. Humanae Vitae, is that a Humanae Vitae?
Don't ask me about pronunciation, man.
Which is back from the 40s or 50s that this was written. These are all very new rules because also this is new issues that we're dealing with.
And this is still a big family era, the 40s and 50s. I mean, this is GI Bill.
But this is
the
also when,
home.
contraception, all of these things are
eventually, yeah.
This is all coming. This is, 20th century. And it's the church's job to take these really beautiful ideals that I find good, true, and beautiful of humanity, of sexuality, of our bodies, of how beautiful sex is and how it reveals the mystery of God. And, what John Paul says, that it's our bodies and sex that it is only our bodies and sex that can make the invisible visible, right? That brings the divine into our earth. I mean, these really beautiful ideals, but it's the church's job to then apply these kind of heady ideals into practical use. And how do we as people live out these ideals in our lives? And that's the church's job, is to figure that out. Mm-hmm. And so we employ our, doctors of the church. We employ our people that have studied this and are experts on morality and philosophy and theology. However, a lot of the people they're priests. These are old men who are celibate, right?
Right.
And I think that they're the guys for the job in a lot of ways, in a lot of other areas, because you're right. Like, they are the people that are prepared for that. But when we talk about marriage and a marital relationship and a sexual relationship, and what that really looks like in the day-to-day, these beautiful heady ideals that they write, and John Paul writes so beautifully and eloquently, but he doesn't know the nitty-gritty of a married life. He doesn't, and
right.
How you write in theory, this is beautiful, that sex should be all unifying, life-giving, all of these things, the way that it was designed to be, and the nature of sex, and all of it's great. But I do think that the way that they have then dictated sex must be lived out can often tear a marital relationship apart. And I don't know how. I don't think that's God's design. I don't know if that was, for us to. I
don't think it is.
So.
No. It's not the loving Christ, right? The Christ of love.
Yes.
The focus on
and
love.
And so as a person who is in a lot of Catholic circles, and I see a lot of Catholic couples that have followed Catholic sexual teaching to a T, and it has made their marriage flourish. It's been great for them. I will say natural family planning is a really cool thing in that it does provide, it requires the husband and wife to work together. It requires a lot of communication, a lot of discernment about your lives, your mental and physical health, all of your, which is great. It doesn't all just fall on the woman. I like that. It's been, that part of it has been great in my marriage. There's a lot of discussion. My husband is very involved, all those things.
And you must remain open to life.
Yes.
As our midwife said.
Yeah. So,
because it's not always going to work.
That can be a great pro, is that it does, it involves both partners
limits
and all of those
perhaps the
things.
Number of children you have, but maybe doesn't stop 100% of those sperms.
But all of those things, like the communication, all of that can be a great pro to a marriage. I know a lot of couples that have felt like it really brought them closer together. It fulfilled them. Great. I know a lot of couples that have followed Catholic sexual teaching to a T, and it wasn't great for them. Really hurt their marriage. Was hard. I know Catholic couples that have decided to not follow Catholic sexual teaching to a T. Great for them. They found a great, balance. I know people that haven't and also didn't like not following Catholic sexual teaching, and it worked. I know that's when the lived experience comes into play, and I've said that a million times, but that is what I think the people who are writing this stuff, who dictate Catholic sexual teaching, that they're missing is that every married couple, every person is going to be different. The relationship's going to be different. What allows for them to have the most complete intimacy and unity is going to be different. That's not, I don't think that's black and white concrete for every couple, but really would provide, every couple's version of intimacy and what brings them there is going to be different.
I'm good with that, man.
Yeah, and you don't know that if you haven't experienced it. You just don't. You won't really be able to grasp that unless you've been there. And so that's my issue with that.
Well, now that we've handled hand jobs,
yeah.
Let me make this even weirder. Let's go to some other taboos, sexual taboos from a Catholic standpoint, and sometimes Protestant as well. So let's get back to this idea that sexual desires are part of how we maintain monogamy, right?
Yes.
By expressing them. But they can also pose a challenge when sex isn't possible or even desired by both parties, as Riley, you're saying, with the ovulation. Leaving aside war and birth injuries, there are simply times when one partner wants it, but the other doesn't. Am I right, confessors? This happens. The longer you're in a relationship, the more often this happens.
More often than not. That's real life, man.
You got to work your way up to it sometimes.
Yeah.
On both sides. What, ladies, don't just assume your man is always ready. And there are simply times when a vegan or vegetarian, back to my metaphor, or a pescatarian craves meat. Humans have invented products, and arguably God has invented mushrooms that help to address this. I love a good portobello. I can have a meat-tasting veggie burger that in no way compromises my moral commitments. It's not exactly like meat, but it has the fat content and protein that my body wants, and I'm good to go. The Impossible Burger or Beyond Meat Burger helps me to maintain my moral commitment by satisfying a desire in a way that will not lead me to violate my promise to myself and my children. But now, here we go. What I can do with a veggie burger, I'm going to argue, very difficult to do with sex in the Catholic context, in a Christian context.
Yeah.
Masturbation. It's that time. The veggie burger of sex, my friends. And by extension, pornography, which the Catholics hate. I gotta say, I like angrily...
More than the Catholics. It's not just the Catholics.
There's a reason I say this, Riley. I don't know if you caught this in the news recently, that the Catholic Church has come up with guidelines on investing, how to invest your money.
No.
Yeah, so this is a new idea.
I don't know. I have kicked myself off Catholic social media. Maybe that's why.
Well, this is a New York. I read it in the Times, but this is. I mean, I'm sure the Catholic social media would have caught hold of this. And what I read in the article, and that made me finally just like slam my computer shut in angst, is that there were frequent references to the Church's concern that companies they are investing in, or, if they're investing in some sort of funds that are invested in multiple companies, may or may not be supporting adult entertainment. However, the Church was pretty lax, in my opinion, on climate change. So the investment advice on climate change is maybe the portfolio has some oil companies in it, but as long as it's not too many. And I was like, oh, you mother effers. I was furious. That, a little bit of oil, whatever. Mm-hmm. Anyhow, so I just, the adult entertainment industry, the white men, not all white men, but the old men you're talking about are very exercised about this.
Yeah.
Here we go. Historically, Masturbation, pornography, sexual fantasy outside of the marriage context have been on the wrong side of Christian ethics. I put masturbation, pornography together because when you masturbate, you fantasize, and pornography is basically a way of realizing those fantasies. And whether that's fantasizing about the hot lifeguard, by the way, at the pool, or watching a video of an actor playing a hot lifeguard with or without his or her bathing suit, it all sort of amounts to the same thing in Matthew. Yes?
Yeah.
You're using the person, if you're imagining it or if you're watching it, all the same idea.
Yeah, the lifeguard at the pool hasn't consented to being
your fantasy.
all those things. Yes.
Right. Although the pornographic actress and actor have, but they're still bad.
Debatable.
Still bad for you, right? Oh, okay. The false consciousness, don't go there. you were so good with the slut shaming. I was with you. Okay, so you're lusting in your heart, though, my sinner. Theoretically, you can fantasize about your wife or your husband, by the way, while you masturbate, and that's actually pretty much cool, as far as I can tell. I mean, you guys, Catholics, you're not cool with it because that's a hand job. But Jesus, if I read Matthew, come on now, is that not a loophole? If we're just sticking with that line in Matthew, which is really where the whole adultery prohibition sits, if I masturbate thinking about my own partner, you're good. But that's not fun. Go ahead.
It's licit if you do it, but then you ejaculate into your partner.
Your wife, yeah.
That's it. Then it's
Jesus
fine.
Didn't say that last part.
Then it's fine. That's then licit.
Your priest made all that stuff up on the side. Jesus just said, I can't lust after people who aren't my wife. So I can go ahead and lust after her all I want.
Why didn't we have that sermon on the, I don't know what, where he listed all that out? Thou
must masturbateth thinking of thine wife. But I mean, I think that's interesting. But
we clear a lot of this up.
Yeah, sure.
This podcast would be a lot shorter. It'd be pretty cut and dry.
Right, and we wouldn't have this whole weird thing about contraception. Everything would be fine. But I do want to talk about lusting, fantasizing about people who aren't your partner, because this Matthew not okay with. So I agreed with Matthew and or Jesus that too much fantasizing about a particular person or too much porn in general is bad for your relationship. But it's also true that sex is an appetite that varies by person and within a person's lifetime, much like the appetite for food, as you've illustrated, Riley. Also, like the appetite for food, we can't wish it away. Eating too much is bad for us, but so is not eating enough. We see countless examples of people who attempt to deny their sexual appetites only to go ahead and break even the most generous moral boundaries of sexual ethics. See, for example, a long list of Christian clergy, right? Protestant and Catholic, and conservative politicians. Oh my goodness, these guys are getting into trouble all the time. I mean, fine Bill Clinton, but, you know. Yikes. If you refuse to have a veggie burger on moral grounds because it tastes like meat, the hazard becomes that you may break down in the middle of the night and eat half a pig out of your fridge. I mean, this is basically what's happening, right, with these clergy members. John Paul II actually offers us a way out of this bind, unintentionally, I suspect, Riley, with his definition of lust as you've been saying, a dehumanizing act that renders the other nothing more than a sexual object. By defining lust in this narrow way, John Paul II opens a space for us to discover a healthy and sustainable approach to sexuality that doesn't necessarily confine itself to the strict limits of some conservative Christian commentators. John Paul II suggests that art, visual or performing, depicting naked or barely clothed bodies, does this sound familiar?
There's a whole chapter on it, yeah.
Can be permissible. I'm sure he's talked about it more than once. It's permissible to gaze upon if the artwork is able to elicit the viewer to take in the body as an aspect of, as Riley's saying, the whole person. A seemingly pornographic work can then be acceptable if it allows us to approach the subject in the fullness of their humanity, which may include their sexuality, but is not limited to it, because after all, it does. Sex is part of the person, particularly the naked body in many of these contexts.
The Vatican's full of boobs and butts and penises. You walk into the Sistine Chapel.
There's Adam hanging out, letting it all hang out. John Paul II says, when the gift-giving meaning of the body, I'm going to quote him at length here, is obscured, distorted, or misrepresented, art becomes a lie. This is what happens in pornography. The body, which was created to be a free gift from one person to another, is depersonalized and reduced to an object for lust. Just like that lifeguard. The naked human body has a language. It expresses the spirit. When given in trust and love, the body is the basis of a communion of persons. Because the naked human body has such importance, it must be depicted with great care to preserve its meaning in art. Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, Riley, I'm going to do something wacky now.
All
I'm
right.
just going to warn you. This thought experiment may hurt you. Let's imagine two newlyweds who like to make videos of themselves having sex and post them to a website where you pay them $1 to watch each video. Don't write me asking who they are. This is purely hypothetical. This couple posts voluntarily. They are fairly compensated on their own terms, and their material represents sexual expression in the context of a loving relationship. Their materials are situated within a context that makes it clear who they are, how they spend their lives, when they're not having sex. They use their sex-focused videos to share their sexual ethics, their personal values, their desires, and their vulnerabilities. Is this possible so far?
Is the situation
my
you're describing
couple,
possible? Yeah.
And
right?
if they're different from John Paul's definition of art, it's really hard to see the line. Like if we're really dealing with people who happen to have sex, but you have to like watch them on vacation and they talk about all their ethics and their value, like they're doing the podcast, right? Like they're doing our conversation here, and then they just have sex.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're viewing few full human beings here. And if we watch the whole video, we're sort of like engaging with them as whole people.
Okay.
Right? I'm not distorting anything here, right? All right.
Yeah.
I am or I'm not?
I mean, I think it has...
I haven't been catechized, remember?
So yeah, but I also think it has less to do with the people themselves and more to do with the viewer. Right?
Okay.
You can watch, I mean, the lifeguard at the pool. You could watch lifeguard at the pool do all that kind of stuff too. You can watch lifeguard at the pool, right? Be a full human person. It's, I think, what the viewer is choosing to view, what the viewer is choosing to receive. I think it has more to do with the person than the subject. Right? I think you could...
Okay, I'm trying to process
if you're watching
this
newlywed couple and you're watching them, you know, I don't know, go to restaurants and walk the beach and like...
And then they have sex.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean that you're still viewing them as a whole human person.
Well,
I don't know. I don't know. I think it still has...
You can get off on that, though, can't you?
Yeah.
I mean, you can find it sexually appealing. I mean, I think a lot of people do. I actually think that I think you and I would agree that a lot of pornography distorts human sexuality by removing a lot of the intimacy.
Yes.
But a lot of people, like, it's like porn for women.
Yeah.
Like reinserts intimacy into the equation.
Romance novels and, I mean, all of that. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I still think it's still kind of a two-way street. I think it has less to do with the subject still, and I don't know what the viewer is doing. And I mean, is the viewer then, if the viewer is getting off on a couple going about their daily lives, are they still not using kind of that couple going about their daily lives to serve a purpose for them? To give them I mean, I don't know. Is that still
to give them pleasure? But
is that still a form of use? Is it still a form of... I don't know.
Well, when I go to the
I don't
art
know either.
museum,
I'm just asking this. I don't know.
How do we differentiate it? I guess from if I'm going to the Louvre and looking at these beautiful naked bodies, I'm getting pleasure out of it. That pleasure is partially. I mean,
you could.
Yeah, it's conceivable.
Which I think, I don't know.
I mean, you're not jerking it in the Louvre. Don't get me wrong.
I just want everyone to say, I'm like, this is me thinking out loud, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
It's a tricky moral scenario, and I know that I've created a tricky moral scenario because it cuts very close to what John Paul's talking about here. It's just allowing for the sex to be fully realized in a way that he perhaps does not envision. But, you know, if we think about avant-garde theater, you've taken my classes on this subject, people taking off their clothes, sometimes live sex acts are incorporated. Why are you there? I mean, if I'm there, I might be there for the art.
Yeah.
But does that mean I'm not going to have sexual feelings as a result?
So that's why I still think it comes back to the person. It also comes back to the pluck out your own eye. I mean, that it has to do with you. is you walking into the Sistine Chapel and, you know, seeing naked people on the ceiling, you know, does that cause lust in you? Does that cause you to want, and that's going to be different for every person and every person's deal and every person's, you know, and if it does, then this is what the church would argue. If it does, then don't walk into the Sistine Chapel. then don't go to museums where there's naked paintings.
I would challenge them that nobody goes into the Sistine Chapel and doesn't say, "Whoa, Adam is cut."
But you can do that. That's fine. That's the point. Like, that's the thing, is you could
good looking Adam.
Is you could say that, and you could appreciate the beauty of Adam's body, and But does it then cause lust within you? Does lust arise within you?
I don't even know what that means, though. Mm-hmm. That's differentiating between lust and sexual feeling in a way that's perplexing to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think it, and I mean, that's when the church
so
says
it raises
it's
sexual feeling
person.
in me. But John Paul's saying if it raises sexual feeling in me, as long as I'm approaching this couple as full human beings, those sexual feelings are not improper.
In a situation like that, could it be? Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, if Adam is raising lustful feelings, like, it's not lust, he's raising sexual feelings in me, but I'm appreciating Adam and all the shit he went through.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he's still sexy.
Yeah.
This is a weird way of talking
I mean, it's
about
such a
this.
super hard. Yeah.
Let me flesh out the scenario. Maybe it'll help. You stumble across these videos on an internet search. You decide to try out watching the videos. You and your partner have sex every Friday night. Some Friday night, your partner doesn't feel like having sex or isn't around. So you pay $1, you buy a video, you watch your video. So you're having sexual feelings, and you're motivated by sexual feelings, but you're also taking in this couple who you find interesting in and of themselves. Mm-hmm. You see what I mean? If your partner is available for sex, you choose not to watch the video. You prefer actual sex with your partner, which feels much better. While you are watching this video, and perhaps even before, you're having erotic thoughts about this husband and wife, but you have no plan of ever replacing your partner with them. The fantasy itself may not even involve you participating in sex with them, but only enjoying them enjoying each other. All conceivable in the spectrum of human sexuality. You may even invite your partner to watch some of their videos with you and attempt replicating what you see with your partner. This couple could model closeness and intimacy in a way that helps you improve your relationship. All possible.
Okay.
Maintaining a healthy interest in sex, even on an off night, may actually bring you closer to your partner. Sometimes when faced with privation, we find other outlets to sublimate our needs to our detriment. Unable to satisfy our sexual appetites, we obsess over work or shopping or video games, and we cut ourselves off from an important and God-given aspect of our humanity. So I guess where I'm pushing on this notion of, I mean, I hear you. So it's almost like if I say to myself, yeah, it's Friday night and I have sex times on Friday night. My wife's not here, so I would like to have sex time. So I'm going to put on these videos. So it is true that I am watching the videos in order to experience sexual feelings. But I am also watching full human beings. You see?
But those human beings aren't your wife.
That's correct.
And that's where...
Neither is Adam.
Hmm?
Neither is Adam.
But you're not acting out those sexual feelings on Adam. Like, I mean, okay.
I'm not acting it out with them either.
Are you just watching them? You're just enjoying this?
I mean, ultimately, I think masturbation is important here because we're talking about the release of a sexual urge. Yeah. And we're talking about the indulgence, in my opinion, of a sexual feeling in order to maintain sexual feeling.
Okay.
Rather than becoming caught up in video games or something. Like, we see this a lot in human relationships where a man or a woman cuts off those feelings because they're frustrated by their partner or they're frustrated by themselves, and they, become work addicted or something, obsessed with their children. Like, there's 100 ways you can ignore your partner. Yeah. But to my mind, this is a way of theoretically maintaining the sexual feeling in a healthy way.
So the church would argue.
There we go.
This is what you would see. I mean, and I see it a lot. This is the response you get is, well, then this is a marital issue. So.
Oh, Lord.
So.
My wife didn't want to do it on Friday night.
Oh, well, okay.
Father?
So is it just your wife not wanting to do it on Friday night, or are you describing, when you're saying, is somebody then turning to video games, turning to work, becoming a workaholic? That this sounds like a repeated issue then, a long-term issue, not just a Friday night thing.
I'm preventing the issue.
You're preventing the issue.
In a John Paulian way.
I still think there's a difference between, a Friday night. I think that most people on the occasional Friday night can... This is what the church would call self-sacrifice. You would sacrifice for the good of the other, and you would shove it
not
up
have sexual
and
feelings. Shove it.
and
Stuff it down.
deal with it, man up a little bit. And like, that's what they would say. Right. And that's what I think most people do when their partner, in a healthy sexual,
you stuff
relationship.
It down. Give it a good stuff.
Well, you man up a little bit. Like if you're having a normal sexual relationship where both of you are generally happy with the sex you're having, the frequency of it, a partner doesn't want to do it one night, you're not like, oh my God, like I need to release this. You can just, you're like, all right. I think if again, you're generally in both of you are happy and fulfilled in your sexual relationship.
You shouldn't need
right.
any of this.
I mean, I'm talking about like the ideal here, but again, for one night, if your partner doesn't want to have sex and you got to turn to, I don't know.
This nice couple. They make very wholesome videos. They just have sex in them.
So then
you make it sound so seedy.
But so then is this need insatiable?
It's only Friday nights, every Friday night. It's not insatiable. It's a need that I'm acknowledging. That's sort of like saying, well, Rob, I get that you're hungry, but couldn't you just not eat for a couple days? Why? Why would I do that to myself? The question is why.
You die. They're definitely.
I can survive a couple days, but I'll start to feel it
in a different way. Okay. I still think that's
as a biological urge.
Yeah. Yes.
It persists.
I am gonna then a little bit on you saying, well, sexual need isn't insatiable. You were going at that.
I'm still hanging with that. It's not insatiable, but it is a need.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not going to deny. In fact, the fact that it's a need is why I think it gets tricky for our Catholic and clergy friends.
I'll finish it. Sorry. I was just giving my church response, the church teaching response, which is that you're then called to self-sacrifice on times, that you were only supposed to have sexual release with your partner. Your partner is the only person that's supposed to inspire sexual release. All of that.
Okay.
All of that. It's even a sin to imagine another person while you're having sex with your partner. Like
right.
all of that.
Naturally.
Yes. All of that is a sin.
Right. Jesus said so in Matthew that one time.
Mm-hmm. In this sermon, that sermon we were talking about where yeah.
Literally that one time.
So again, all of this Catholic, all of this.
Yes.
So that, again, the church teaching is that you were then called to self-sacrifice, man up, kind of get over it.
Okay.
However, if this is turning into a problem in your marriage and that there is a lack of sex, is that one person is, one or either party is unhappy, it's then turning into, it's a crippling of the marriage, all the things you were talking about. Well, then that's when we go to therapy. That's when we work on communication. That's when we figure out what's going on. Like that's what then the church's response would be and I've seen that a lot, is then let's work on communication. Let's work on how we can compromise here so that we're both achieving the sexual relationship that we need, and what lifestyle changes might need to happen. All of those things.
Well, let me ask you, do you think it's reasonable for the adult's sexual feelings to be fully processed within a monogamous relationship as contained as you've described, with no fantasy,
possible?
With no fantasy of other people?
For that to never happen? No.
Okay.
No.
It's a self-policing then that I think is problematic.
But I do think that it's something that you can work for. I do think it's something that you can still be fulfilled in.
So it's an unattainable ideal.
I don't know about the fantasizing. I think that you could. I do. Okay, wait. Let me finish what I was.
Go ahead.
So.
Well, to fantasize.
I think we're gonna get back into this again, where it's I don't know. You
like another woman's face will never pop into my head.
So that's then when it comes back to the intent. So did you intend that? Did you plan for and are you gonna then are you gonna
off the hook if it's an accident?
Well, so that's the ejaculation thing too, is that you can't ejaculate inside of your wife, but if it happens on accident, it's not a sin.
So cool.
It's all about intent. That's most of sin. It's about intent. So in that, if another woman's face, of course it's gonna happen. If another woman's face pops into your head, though, are you then entertaining that? Are you using that, or are you it's what do you do with those thoughts? That's in most of
Do you want me to make this harder for you?
Oh,
I got you so far, but I'm gonna make this worse.
All right. Wait, did I? I guess I might get into that, but I also think there's a huge difference. This is me personally, in the masturbation versus pornography issue here.
Okay. Which one's okay?
So I'm not saying like I'm not
Neither
saying that.
one.
I'm saying
Both
me
bad.
personally.
Okay.
There's a huge difference in just throwing the two together in the context like, of a marriage. I think that, or in morality, I think that is that pornography gets a lot messier. And I would say even most non-religious people, a lot of would say that it's a lot harder if we're talking about that. There might be some moral situations where this is permissible. I mean, what we're describing right now is incredibly specific, and I would say almost impossible to stick to in the terms of pornography. Anyway, so I think those two are very different.
Okay. You're slippery sloping me here a bit.
Yeah, I mean, pornography.
It's impossible not to get into the depraved donkey sex.
I mean, pornography and masturbation, I would say. I think it's just they're definitely, I think, two different conversations. There are two different conversations for a lot of non-religious people too, and I think in relationships as well, that I know that, masturbation is fine, but a lot of people can still consider pornography to be not cool, in their relationship.
Wait a second.
Oh, God.
If it sounds like this couple is violating or causing you to violate biblical sexual prohibitions, I'd like you, Riley, to imagine them a little bit differently.
Okay.
Let's suppose it's thousands of years ago, and the video camera hasn't been invented yet. And this couple, instead of recording themselves, decides to write a poem about their experience together and relate their sexual union to their relationship with God. And let's suppose that they decide to share this poem, and it ends up in one of the chapters of the Bible.
Song of Solomon.
The Song of Songs shows that Canticle of Canticles, as Augustine called it, shows that it's possible to make sex and sensuality the subject of representation or art, and it's all right if it elicits sexual feelings. Although he explicitly forbids pornography, reading John Paul II with Solomon actually makes space for erotic art as an outlet for human sexual expression on the part of both the creator and the viewer.
Yeah.
The Song of Songs is hot.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It's
beautiful.
It's beautiful. And
it's hot.
I mean, and it fits. I will then still argue is that, I mean, one of my favorite parts of the Catholic teaching on sexuality, again, is that the way sex was designed by God perfectly reflects his relationship to us. I mean, in a beautiful way, in that, again, the central theme in Catholicism of physical unity, and that God wants to unite with his creature. Creator wants to unite with his creature. And that the Song of Solomon is this beautiful poem of two lovers, but it's also a metaphor for God's love for us and God's love for his creation. And especially in Catholicism, Catholicism specifically, you have the Eucharist. I mean, it is physical unity. We compare the two all the time. In Mass, when the bread is goes through transubstantiation, becomes the Eucharist, the priest, the moment it happens, says, "This is my body given up for you," which is what Jesus said at the Last Supper. And that is what, we say in a marital relationship, in a sex, in sex. This is my body given up for you.
Oh.
It's what our bodies say.
Oh, good.
No, it has to be repeated.
Riley's not making this argument, but I do want to bring this up. Riley mentioned metaphor.
Yeah.
Let's do this a bit. In the year 100, Rabbi Akiva said that the song should not be treated as an expression of love between a man and a woman, but rather as an allegory, with the woman representing Israel and the man God taking Israel out of Egypt. So this is Judaism before we even get around to Christianity. Christian interpreters, however, followed Akiva and argued that the woman was the church and the man was Christ. That's something you're probably more familiar with, right? But there was no real textual evidence to suggest that the song was intended to be read as an allegory. In the 19th century, readers started to ask where anybody got this allegorical reading in the first place. Some scholars have observed parallels between the song and ancient Egyptian love poems, accentuating the idea that the Song of Songs was always meant to be read as a literal relationship, which you're comfortable with, right? Yeah. Between a man and a woman. Modern commentators have often interpreted the song as basically all of the above. That's really what you're saying. You want it, you like your allegory, but you're fine with it being a literal sexual union between two people.
Yeah.
Allegory
that is also repeated in other parts of the Bible too, and in church. I mean, Catholic
not nearly
church
as hot
tradition.
as the Song of Songs.
Definitely not as hot.
So it's an allegory with spiritual overtones and positive representation of sensual love between a male and a female. Let's hear a bit.
You are a garden locked up, my sister, my bride. You are a spring enclosed, a sealed fountain. Your plants are an orchard of pomegranates with choice fruits, with henna and nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with every kind of incense tree, with myrrh and aloes and all the finest spices. You are a garden fountain, a well of flowing water, streaming down from Lebanon.
Awake, north wind, and come, south wind. Blow on my garden, and its fragrance may spread everywhere. Let my beloved come into his garden and taste its choice fruits.
I have come into the garden, my sister, my bride. I have gathered my myrrh and my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb and my honey. I have drunk my wine and my milk.
Eat, friends, and drink. Drink your fill of love.
I slept, but my heart was awake. Listen, my beloved is knocking. Open to me, my sister, my darling, my dove, my flawless one. My head is drenched with dew, my hair with the dampness of the night. I have taken off my robe. Must I put it on again? I have washed my feet. Must I soil them again? My beloved thrust his hand through the latch opening. My heart began to pound for him. I rose to open for my beloved, and my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with flowing myrrh. On the handles of the bolt, I opened for my beloved, but my beloved had left. He was gone. My heart sank at his departure.
The myrrh dripping from the hands and
The honey and
the wind coming through her
my
garden
gosh.
and her fragrance fills the room.
Yeah.
We're talking about sexual fluids here, for sure. The lock and putting my hand in the lock, that doesn't sound like, well, as long as we ejaculate.
Yeah,
properly,
again.
it's all good.
Yep.
Use your hands however you please.
Yep.
Well, the Song of Solomon represents a monogamous union, encouraging the kind of union circumscribed by the prohibition against adultery. It also opens the door, by the way, I think, Riley, for my newlywed scenario. When I read my Bible, specifically the Song of Songs, I am reading an erotic representation of a couple of which I am not a member. I am having sexual thoughts and feelings about people who aren't me and aren't described as me and my wife. Isn't that kind of weird? Isn't that a lot to wrestle with? Theologically, I mean, there's strong... you're talking about a lot of sexual boundaries in the Catholic Church around all these things. Masturbation, pornography, on and on. But here we have this book in the Bible that is erotica. Like, there's no debate it. You really have to do mental gymnastics to say that's not erotica.
It is.
Which then suggests that the Bible endorses erotica at the very least, which to me then creates a slippery slope between erotica and pornography. I hear you about pornography for sure, but I think there's a lot of moral gray area in here.
So, I've kind of said it, I'll say it again, the church teaching, like, to that, response to that. And I see it a lot in, like, modern day. I even in some, like, Facebook groups that make me laugh.
Song of Solomon.
Women, or like, what's permissible and what's not.
Uh-huh.
And
people like read the Song of Solomon.
It's going to be different for every person because it all has to do again with what you how you act upon it is the church's teaching.
Okay.
Again,
so the ladies like, can I read a romance novel?
For some people, reading a romance novel like might be fine. Some people watching a sex scene in a movie, they're not acting upon it. It's not going to drive them crazy. Then it would be permissible for like that's when it's about the whole. It's up to you to discern. It's for you to decide. It's going to be different for every person. Different people have different thresholds, turn-ons, all the things. So for some people, reading a romance novel is going to be fine. For some people, reading a romance novel, maybe it wouldn't be. Like that would lead them to.
I would put
whatever.
to a celibate priest reading the Song of Solomon. It's going to be hard for him not to
maybe
have a little experience.
But that's his deal. Like that's
Is it bad? Is it bad? Is it morally wrong?
Is he jerking off to it? That would be the church's thing. Truly, that would be it. That would be it. Is it keeping him up at night? And then is he then, That's the church's response.
And we blame him, even though it is in his own Bible.
I mean, it's up to him. I don't know.
It's in the Bible saying, here's some erotica. Read this, enjoy. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't be saying any other
it.
thing.
Yeah.
Weird. Yes,
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah.
Because these people are getting it, says the Bible. Listen to them get it. They get it hard with some myrrh.
Yeah.
Grab you some myrrh. Have a good time.
Yeah. I get it. I get it. I do.
All right. Still not happy with my newlyweds, but you see how close
I do. No, I totally understand.
murky.
I totally understand. Yes.
And
yes.
I honestly, I think what I love about this conversation that we're having is the way it circumscribes some things that both of us would agree are toxic about our culture. I mean, maybe my listeners have wondered why I've obsessed so much over Christianity. It's because I believe that Christianity has important moral lessons and spiritual lessons to teach, and that we lose a lot when we say we're above or beyond Christianity. Oh, Christianity is something I've gotten over. And we lose a lot of... Jesus was brilliant, in my opinion. A brilliant moral teacher, and maybe God. I don't really think so. I could still be... I could go either way on that question. But you see what I mean. I mean, we're talking about... I'm trying to pull Riley into my, sinful, view of Song of Solomon. But in doing so, what we're both agreeing on is that a spiritual interpretation of sex is important. A whole person interpretation of sex is important. My newlywed couple, even if they're falling outside of the strictures of the church, Protestant or Catholic, nevertheless, what I've described, as you're saying, Riley, is not something that we often could consider pornography. It's certainly out there, and there's actually a whole ton of it out there. But we think about your Pornhub, gangbangs.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't want to be reductive either, but
if you also, Pornhub releases their the list of their 10 most viewed videos of the year.
It's that time of year.
And there's never one of them that isn't, I think,
it's generally
racist,
incest,
misogynistic, all the things.
Incest, that kind of thing. The
violent, everything. So
the woman is often not treated in a humane fashion.
Yeah. Which is why I think, again, it's I agree that in my opinion, none of this is black and white, and which is why I think that when it comes to sexual morality, it's going to. I do think that there is obviously concrete truth, and moral truth, definitely, but that there is also gray area that is going to depend on each person, and I think that's also what Jesus brings it back to a lot, is that it is up to each person to discern within themselves, what brings them closer to God, what brings them closer to truth and beauty and all of those things, and their relationship, what brings their relationship closer to God, what brings their relationship closer to truth and beauty and goodness and all of that. And I that's going to differ for each person. And that's so fair. That's the general, and that's for everyone to decide. Again, this is me personally, my opinion, but that's for everyone to decide what brings my relationship, what brings myself closer to goodness, what brings it closer to God, what brings it closer to truth, all of those things.
But you're not entertaining moral relativism there.
Because there's obviously, there's also concrete truths, within that. But because I also think that goodness and God and truth, all of those things is not relativist at all. I think, again, what goodness is, goodness is a concrete truth. And I think that there are, so what brings yourself closer to that, though, is different for every person. But that doesn't mean that goodness is different for every person. You know what I mean by that?
Go on.
Yes.
I think that's worth...
So I don't think that God... I think that God is who God is. I think that goodness is what goodness is. That's not different for every person. I don't think, that is different for every person. But, how a person might get there, we're all created by God differently, designed by God differently. And our path to finding him, to finding goodness, is different. But that doesn't mean that goodness is different for every person.
All right. Okay.
Right? You can't just say, well, killing people brings me close to my goodness. Well, no, because that's not what goodness is. Goodness is not killing people. Goodness is not whatever. I'm using that as an example. But
So we're talking about goodness, talking about love.
yes, those things that those
Community.
are not relative to me. But again, we all are designed differently. We're all created differently, and we have different ways of getting to God, getting to goodness.
So in many ways, you're pushing against the Catholic tradition of complex rules around sex, sundry
I
other
think there
things.
are obviously
Getting in a Protestant direction
I think
here.
most people have rules around sex.
Yes.
But
They're not determined by a council
I mean, and obviously,
of cardinals.
I also do abide by the Catholic rules to sex personally, me.
But you question
me,
them.
but I also know that is what has allowed me, my marriage, my relationship, my family to flourish.
Mm-hmm.
It's what's going great for us. It is bringing my marriage closer to God. It has heightened our intimacy, our marriage. That's great. Like, so it's working for us, but I also can totally understand how that's not going to work. And maybe it won't work for us in a different season of our life. Like, that's going to alter and change. And again, I think that
You're open to flowing with it.
yes.
But you think you can remain Catholic in the flow.
But there's plenty of people that would disagree with me.
Your ability
that's
to
fine.
flow. They
And
think to
that's
remain
fine.
Catholic is to hold hard and fast to the rules as determined
And
by
that's
the Council
and
of
that's
Cardinals.
fine. And yeah, and that's fine. I mean,
Yeah.
but I'm saying that this is me personally. But yeah. And so
I'll put a button on it. If we read Jesus
Yeah.
through the whole of the Gospels and the whole of the Bible, rather than taking his comments on adultery and the Sermon on the Mount out of their full context, we arrive perhaps a bit further than John Paul II would want us to go. By us, I mean me, but in a place that I'm reasonably comfortable with. We have sexual feelings toward others, regardless of our marital status. Sexual fantasies are natural and not necessarily unhealthy, as long as they do not dehumanize the subjects of our fantasies, and as long as our fantasies do not overtake our affection for our partners. The Song of Songs demonstrates that sexual fantasies are not anathema to Judeo-Christian spirituality, but can be a healthy spiritualization of our sexuality. The Song of Solomon also teaches us that our erotic lives shape our spiritual lives, and so we must strive to make our sexual feelings as healthy as possible in their relation to others. That's like a stew of things I think Riley would both agree and disagree with.
I think I agree with
On the whole,
yeah.
what is the part that I think you may... Our fantasies are okay, as long as we don't dehumanize our subjects.
So I mean, I personally agree with that. Yes.
But that is not okay, really, from a church. I think John
there's
Paul
it's
can
still-
be read that way.
It's still debate. Yeah, I definitely agree with. I mean, and that's. I think you could have a really long. And you could go longer debating the intricacies of that and the. But I agree with that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it gets to erotica and all that, we're just going to leave that. Nah. That is weird. All right. I hereby adjourn and declare closed this meeting of the Secret Order of Alchemical Actors until such time as we get together and do it again. Riley, my goodness, this was a fun conversation. I hope you enjoyed it.
I did so much.
My name's Dr. Rob C. Thompson, here with Riley Claxton Hernandez, our resident Catholic. I, of course, am your supreme Hierophant, bringing to a close this portion of our conversation on Christianity. This was part 2 of our Christian sex ed pair of episodes. But, we talked about prosperity gospel and all these fun things.
Oh, you did?
We did, yeah. It was Sam's episode.
That.
You got to have a listen to that. So we're moving on now to occult Christianity, occultists who used Christianity as the paradigm for the work that they undertook. So we're going to talk about just a few. We're going to do Anna Kingsford, who I love. We're going to do Charles Ledbetter, who is neat, I don't love as much as Anna Kingsford. And we're going to do the Urantia book, which is a popular one with our listeners who've been looking forward to me doing the Seventh-day Adventist alien tale.
Oh.
Yeah. Pulling together biblical themes and Adam and Eve and all sorts of fun stuff here on Occult Confessions.